Hello everyone, welcome to Litera TV. I'm Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, and I'm joined today by Christian Lang and Andy Klein. Andy is founder and CEO of Rain & Court, and Christian is Head of Strategy. Hi guys.
Hi Caroline.
Hey Caroline, how are you?
Thank you so much for joining me.
Great to be here.
After what's been another crazy week of COVID. It's sort of never ending. So Christian, just to introduce you, so we're here to talk about Rain & Court. So there's been a lot of developments recently, and so we're going to probably focus on those, but also talk to, for anyone not familiar with Rain & Court, we're going to give you a lot of information about the platform, some updates in terms of how it's working. But just to introduce you guys first. So Christian, I'm going to start with you. You're a recovering lawyer, associate at Davis Polk and Wardwell. Is that right?
Yeah, way back when, it feels like now.
Way back when. And Andy, you were at Cravath, again, way back when. I've got a funny, I like to have little known facts. So when I was looking into your sort of before you founded, you founded Rain & Court in 2017. Before that, I didn't know this. This is on your website, so probably other people do. But anyway, so your first company, the Spring Street Brewing Company, made America's first Belgium-style beer called Wit, which is why that was your first investment company, was called Wit Capital. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
And that was quite a long time ago. And then so Wit went public in 1999. Since then, you founded a couple more asset management companies, Skybridge Capital and Ultra Capital. And then it was in 2017 that you launched Rain & Court, wasn't it?
Exactly.
And that was, so tell me about, so for people that did, what we're going to do is we're going to sort of update people in terms of the firms that are involved and the recent investment. But tell me first of all, so for people who either just want to remind themselves about Rain & Court or just, aren't familiar, just explain how the platform works.
Well, the platform can be thought of in general terms as an app store for legal technology. If you think about an app store in a comprehensive way, there are a couple of components to it. There's a solution store that is probably the one people will think of most readily, where you can go and find content that we develop about apps and about vendors that are available in the market. So it's designed to help take time and cost out of sourcing technology. But secondly, and maybe much more profoundly, the platform includes a whole operating system by which a modern law firm can adopt, manage, and monitor modern cloud-based applications, but applications that through the platform run in private cloud infrastructure that stays under the control of the law firm and therefore increases security and stability compared to other ways of adopting cloud applications, namely SaaS applications. So think of it as an operating system tied together with a catalog of available applications. And then there's some other bits of functionality that are quite important, including a facility for testing applications. We call them test drives, a data hub that's being developed to drive interoperability between and among applications. But holistically, it's a single platform that's designed to take time and cost out of accelerating adoption of new technology.
Yeah. And one of the reasons for creating it was because a lot of firms are still on premise, right, in terms of the technology and have trouble trouble adopting cloud applications. Is that right? Does that still ring true?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the large law firms, and particularly law firms all over the world that serve large banks and other very, very demanding clients, cloud computing has presented a huge challenge because, notwithstanding many advantages to the model of software as a service, it requires the law firm or the client to take their content and trust it out to a vendor. And if you have one vendor, that might seem reasonable, but the modern law firms today already run 3, 4, 5, in some cases even 600 different applications. And the burden of trusting and getting confidence and staying vigilant against all those different environments and all the different people who could get at your content has been extremely challenging. For some of the big firms, it's just a complete non-starter. They just don't do it. And then for others, they've taken steps towards adopting a select number of cloud vendors, but now they see that almost all modern software is being built to run in the cloud. And so the question we're trying to solve is, how do you bridge that world between the needs of the security and compliance department on the one hand, and the needs of the business to get access to the best technologies and run them on modern infrastructure. And so very much it's about enabling the journey to the cloud, but without sacrificing the standards around security and data privacy and ultimately the stability that firms require.
And you were, I think you were the first person to talk to me about containerization back in 2017. And that's obviously a fundamental principle, isn't it? That you effectively package up, for want of a more technical description. I don't know if you want to add. I'm sure, so our audience is quite techie, but as you know, or Latera TV's audience is quite techie, but just explain how it works in terms of the ability to run these applications in whatever environment people choose.
Yeah, that's right. So our whole platform is built on the foundations of cloud native computing and the technology that you accurately define as containerization. Developed initially by Google over decades, and then gifted to the open source community about 5 or 6 years ago, and now massively adopted by every large technology company in the world. Containers basically make software portable. They enable a vendor of software to write code once, package it in a little box together with the dependencies required to run the application, and release it to infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, whether it's their own or at Amazon or Google or Microsoft or any other cloud infrastructure. And just out of the box, the software will run, and automation will take over the traditional role of administering the scaling in and scaling out and monitoring of the software. So it truly makes cloud software portable, which is the core enabling technology here that enables a vendor to deliver software to the market and lets the customer of the software decide where to run that software and essentially bring their own infrastructure and have modern cloud computing that stays under their control.
Okay. So in terms of, so you started out with, forgive me, Christian, I know we're going to come on to talk about the latest investment. Just don't doze off. So, and actually just jump in at any point, Christian, as well. So, it started out with the backing of 12 global law firms led by Clifford Chance and Latham. What does that look like today? Just bring us up to date.
Well, the consortium is now 20 law firms. There were originally 12, and then quite early became 19. And then in an announcement we made just a couple of weeks ago, we added the largest law firm in Japan to that group. They also became a shareholder.
Nishimura and Asahi.
That's right. And that group of 19, now 20, has been really the core development partnership that's enabled us to really understand the goals and the challenges and the opportunities that the large law firms were focused on, and really design and now build and launch Reign in Court to try to meet those needs. Yeah.
So so you've got because I think we need to differentiate. So you've got the 24 firms, but of which only 2 of them are now 3. Are invested.
Well, actually, two, Clifford Chance and Latham, were original investors. Oric invested, and now a 4th has invested. So we have actually 4 law firm shareholders, totally separate relationship. That is the investment. On the one hand, compared to the participation in the collaboration group, which we call a consortium.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it? So you've had, a lot of the press that you've had lately has been around the investment. So I think we should talk about that. So just to bring people up to speed. So your first investment round was in December, not in December 2018. And that was, it was a 10, explain how it works, because it was actually 7 million, wasn't it? You had a 10 million facility, but actually of which you explain better than I can.
Well, yeah, it's not that complicated. The important thing to understand is that we raised $10 million. There were two closings, and which is why it was reported into chunks. But essentially, $10 million of investment capital in that first financing, and then just a couple of weeks ago we announced a second financing, which was led by a global venture capital fund called Ventec, with participation that came again in a second closing, but as part of that same financing with Nishimura and Asahi.
Yeah, and it was again, Clifford and Latham invested again, didn't they?
That's right. The existing shareholders invested again, and Ventec was the lead investor, as is quite typical in a venture round.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's 4.5 million, and then so Nishimura and Asahi, that was part of the round, but it was announced later, wasn't it? And was the plan always to raise further funds? So obviously it was a couple of years ago that you did the last. Was the plan always to raise further funds?
Well, the original plan at the time we did the first financing was to launch the platform, and then during 2021 raise a second round, what the venture community would call a Series B financing.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of the COVID outbreak, we just took the view to be very conservative, that we would accelerate the effort to get a second round of capital way in advance of needing it. And in the event, we were fortunate that there was a lot of interest in the company. We wound up doing a smaller round than a Series B because we didn't need all of that money, but we also wanted to make sure we would have plenty of money if COVID had, become even more of a disruption. In the event, happy to say that the big firms that we serve have weathered COVID with far less damage than they anticipated, and mostly, although it's not quite normal, most firms are busier than ever and are back to doing innovation. But with all the uncertainty about that, we didn't want to take any chances, and so we decided to raise a second round a bit earlier, so that we're fully funded. But with the money we have now, we go all the way into 2022, which is pretty good runway for a company at our stage.
Yeah. So I want to actually, I've got, before I start talking about Nishimura, because what I want to find out is a little bit about what that means in terms of opening up the Japanese market, and what vendors who are interested in that market will have to, should be thinking about. But first of all, I think, can you explain, maybe Kristin or either of you, what is involved for a vendor? And there's, I'm going to come on to, obviously there's a reason for asking this. What is involved for a vendor in terms of repackaging their product up for the Rain & Court platform?
Go ahead, Kristin, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, sure. It really depends, Caroline. So, vendors can participate in our ecosystem without doing anything differently. Like we want to create a true marketplace for legal technology, a curated set. So it's the people that the largest firms and the largest legal departments need to know about, but anyone can participate and list even their existing offerings and their existing deployment models. But as Andy was talking to earlier, the maturation of the Kubernetes ecosystem and the portability of applications is becoming increasingly important in the enterprise technology vertical. And in fact, most big investors are making big bets that that's where the growth is going to happen. So if a vendor wants to make their app portable, so they not only can offer a SaaS offering to their customers, but they can let a customer run it on their own infrastructure and just meet a customer wherever that customer lives, whatever that customer needs for whatever idiosyncratic reason, they can package it up. And the work involved in doing that for Rain & Court can be very small or very large, depending on where that vendor is starting from. A key point, we deliberately hew incredibly closely to just cloud native computing foundation best practices. So we don't ask the vendors to do anything weird or specific for Rain & Court. We ask them to have Docker containerized solutions for Kubernetes orchestration with a Helm manifest as the packaging standard that we use, which are best in class, and it's what everyone is kind of doing. So if it's a modern application that's been designed recently with a microservices architecture, they're essentially Rain & Court ready to go. I mean, there's a little bit of tweaking that we're talking a couple of days worth of tweaking. Now, if it's an old application, that has not been designed with that modern cloud native paradigm, then it can be a bit more of a lift. Ironically, really old applications can be containerized quite easily in a monolithic way, but the ones in the middle sometimes have a lift. And it just depends what the vendor needs to do and what the vendor needs to achieve. And we see ourselves as kind of an honest broker, neutral intermediary in just the pipes and plumbing. So if a law firm wants to take a solution in a SaaS posture, that's great. And we're trying to add value through services automation and data hub connectivity and other things. But if a firm or a corporate needs to take that application, run it somewhere else under its direct control, and there's a lot of interesting use cases for that you might not expect, and we can talk about them maybe in the context of the Japanese market. We try to make that very easy, and we have automated testing pipelines that vendors can come in and package this stuff up and test it and see how it works, and our engineers get quite involved with the vendors to help make that happen.
So let's talk about the Japanese market, because one of the reasons for asking was because obviously, I mean, it's interesting because someone described it, someone was saying to me that that it's a relatively small market. They were sort of questioning what the impact will be for vendors. Will it open up the Japanese market? Obviously, there's a number of hugely successful Japanese corporates, and it's a very desirable and often regarded as quite difficult to penetrate market. So I suppose my question is, how will for vendors? Do you anticipate that it will help to open up that market? But then the reason for asking about the work involved is, I guess for vendors where it will take a lot of effort to if they were to have to repackage that they're offering, then query whether they would do so.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, simply, Caroline, because it really depends on the pathway to localizing for the Japanese market, the application. There are some tools, document storage, document management tools, for example, that are already, de facto leaders in Japan.
Yeah.
The same folks that we all know from other markets, because at the end of the day, that's not language or law specific. And so it's much easier. On the other hand, if you look at the AI analysis tools that really depend on the quality of the training of those models, no one's really cracked that yet in a profound way. The challenge for the Japanese firms is not trivial, because the market in Japan is completely different than the markets that we know in the UK or the US, particularly. There are 30,000 lawyers in total in Japan. That is a limiting factor, not only for the revenue of vendors, but for the flow of capital into Japanese technology and legal tech specifically. So it's not going to be, easy to conclude that every vendor has an opportunity in Japan that's justifiable when they calculate the costs of localizing their tools. Some will think it's a big opportunity, and some will think there's none at all. The Japanese are very committed to modernizing their legal industry, and they are not yet even at the level of modernization that the leading global firms that we have worked with to date are. And so for the Japanese, I think it's a big opportunity to work with global vendors of legal tech to figure out where and how they can accelerate the localization of those efforts. There is a legal tech community in Japan. It's growing. It's still very small. Some of those technologies, if they're going to become better funded and more important, will need to find customers outside. So it actually will be, to some extent, bi-directional. But the fascinating thing about the Japanese market, as you alluded, is that it's an extremely rich economy, the second or third biggest economy in the world, massive amounts of corporate wealth, and very, very competent institutions. I had the pleasure of doing a joint venture in Japan in the 1990s with Mitsubishi Corporation and a number of other partners, and spent about a year there. Fascinating opportunity, very challenging, but without local partners, it's impossible. And so we believe that we can play a role, not only helping the law firms accelerate, but helping the vendors figure out whether there's an opportunity for them to bring their products to the Japanese market.
And arguably, using the Renin Court platform would be easier than going to the websites. I think for people, wanting to, given the occasional, language barrier, etc. Or just, and I think it would be easier for people to interact perhaps with your platform than having to go trawl through different websites and trying to get demos and all of that kind of stuff. Christian, you mentioned use cases. Did you have anything you wanted to add in terms of the?
Yeah, it's funny. Thank you, because I was going to circle back and add one
Yeah.
point to what Andy just was saying to answer your previous question, but actually expand the aperture just a little bit. So, and this is the thing that a lot of people haven't yet gotten their brains around. You know, the portability of applications. Andy spoke very well earlier to why that's important to facilitate a journey to the cloud that doesn't ask you to change your security expectations, stability expectations, et cetera. There are also some other really important implications of that. And thinking about these international markets, some of which are quite far flung, is a really important way to do that. So, you know, for example, we have lots of dialogues running with great law firms in Australia. Australia is a very well-developed legal technology market as a result of the competitive pressures. Your audience probably knows this story pretty well. And they're also very cloud first and cloud friendly, right? So they're happy to jump into cloud technologies. The problem is, you know, in this wildly blooming and diversifying legal technology market where all these cool tools are cropping up, there's lots of interesting, great best-in-class point solutions that don't yet have a presence in Australia. And yet a lot of these Australian law firms need to run, they're happy to run cloud applications, but they need to run it in a way with data sovereignty where the data doesn't leave Australia. So the very same portability that allows a law firm that's just getting its feet wet in cloud to take a cloud app and run it on premises allows an international law firm to take a legal tech tool from a different marketplace and bring it in and run it on infrastructure, even cloud infrastructure, in their market. And when you combine that kind of data governance angle of being able to control where it goes and run it on chosen infrastructure, even if that's cloud infrastructure, with the ability to deploy apps at the push of a button that are pre-tested and pre-vetted, all of a sudden now you're into the realm of kind of tactical and strategic deployment of technologies. A lot of us think about selling legal tech and still in terms of the 3-year, you know, multi-license agreement, enterprise license agreement of firms, right? That's not the future. The future, just like in the consumer market that was enabled by the Apple App Store and Google Play Stores and is now being enabled in enterprise because of Kubernetes, is moment of need deployment of technologies, plug them in like a Lego block into an operational ecosystem, pay for what you use and put them back on the shelf. And it's that ability to give vendors the ability to reach into those international markets tactically without having to put a big presence up in that local market, we think is incredibly significant. So Japan is a beachhead, but there are others like Australia and other markets where that's incredibly significant.
Okay, thank you. How do you, so how many vendors are involved on the platform now? Is it about, it's going to be 200 this year, is that right? I think it's growing quite a lot recently.
Yeah, it's changing every day. I mean, we are trying as hard as we can without trying to create a needle in a haystack experience. We're trying to work with as many vendors as we can. We have, you know, bandwidth limitations. We're running dialogues with I think it's right now, it's a little over 200, more than 100 of those have signed up their first contract with us and are in our solution store working towards participating and turning on that listing. And we'll just kind of go as fast as we can. Our focus on, so that again, vendors can participate with their existing offerings. In terms of the portable deployable products, that prioritization is driven by our earliest customers telling us, I want that one, that one, that one. So our priority to us at this stage, but now we've got now that we're hitting some scale, we're starting to sign up our first non-consortium contracts and really starting to expand in a material way such that we're triggering those marketplace network effects. We have several dozen vendors that are just kind of taking a leap of faith, jumping in and doing all that containerization work without even necessarily having a law firm telling them to do it. And that's where we want to be. We think vendors are very well incentivized to do this for their own selfish reasons. And we're trying to make it easy and helpful. And so.
It strikes me sometimes raining courts, it can be quite Marmite. And I think it's because sometimes things when they're new, like some vendors get it and some just continuously say to me, I don't get it. But so is there a type of vendor, do you think, that this either really is, what sort of, is there a type of vendor do you think is most successful on this platform? Like, or perhaps are there types of vendors that you would say, actually, this is just not going to work for them, and then this, so that, you know, you say, well, actually it's more logical for you, very much not for you.
Yeah, so let me call out two examples of vendors I think it particularly well suited for the platform. So there's a swath of vendors. Now this is kind of a short-term reality, but there's a swath of vendors that have had cloud-only, SaaS-only offerings and have been trying to sell to the biggest law firms in the world who can't take them in SaaS. And so we've enabled them to deploy on premises, take their same cloud app and deploy it on premises. That's a key use case. But for me, that's a short-term use case. We're all about managing that journey to the cloud. I think the better example, like I had a great call this week with one of our closest vendor partners, SDL, with great machine translation solution, their Edge engine, right? We have a huge number of firms who are very interested in making those utilities available. Right now, I was an M&A lawyer. If I'd stumbled across a foreign language document, I'm sure, I hope John Cap, cover your ears. We all used to go to Google Translate and just paste it in, right? And that's how we got our machine translation. We now have the ability with our plumbing, literally, we can go on the platform, you can click a button, you can deploy SDL's machine translation engine, which operates just like Google Translate, looks just like Google Translate, and put it in somebody's hands in like 3.5 minutes, and you can just go, right? And so it's firms that want to be able to tactically deploy something like that, unexpected need, put it in somebody's hands, pay for what they need by the page, and put it back on the shelf. That's the use case that is really paradigm shattering. Because right now, when people need technologies, they can't get access to them because it takes 6 months and $30,000 to make it available. We're trying to take that from months to minutes. And it's those utilities like that you can just plug in at the moment of need that I think are really the best fit. We can do a lot for a lot of things. We can help those other vendor categories, but it's those solutions where the need crops up and you need to be able to deliver something to the business now. That's where the plumbing and automation of our platform in the promise of that Kubernetes orchestration, that is really a game changer for me.
Caroline, one other thing that I think might help people, vendors who don't fully understand the pain points that we're trying to address, understand them better, is to understand the problem that arises from the sheer number of applications that the large law firms run. I said before, most of the modern, newer, most exciting applications were built for the cloud.
Yeah.
Particularly, the AI applications require that elasticity of compute. Of course, given the choice, every SaaS vendor would prefer that they could stay uniquely, solely focused on SaaS because it gives them certain advantages of deployment efficiency and ability to control the performance of their own application when they control the infrastructure. When some of those vendors hear us talk about the opportunity to containerize, they think, why would I want to do that? I'm going to get all the customers to come on my platform and trust me. Yeah. And it's not that they can't be trusted, and it's not that their people or expertise or their cloud capabilities are any less than the best. It's that if you're the customer and you have not just one of those, but you have 50 or 100, or imagine even 500 of those, how do you make that manageable from the consumer of the software? How many relationships, how many audits, how many different contracts and policies and personnel standards can one customer be responsible for maintaining? And in the context of a law firm, it's compounded by the fact that the law firms often don't even get to decide their own policies, because if I'm a law firm and I have 150 bank clients and each bank tells me that I can't take their content and put it out into a cloud controlled by a third party without their consent, it's completely unmanageable. So it's the issue of scale that makes the current trend towards everyone having their own SaaS deployment completely unmanageable from the perspective of the large law firm or the large client. And so it's that problem that we help the law firms and the in-house legal departments, which we're beginning to work with, make it possible that they can move into cloud computing without sacrificing their standards. And the vendors that understand that fall in line. They don't all understand that yet, and they may, and the ones that are most difficult are also the ones that are most valuable, because
can I interrupt you? Just because we've literally about to run out of time. Are you still? Forgive me, and that's really helpful. Are you still are there how would you describe in terms of the number of customers in production? Are there sort of lots of customers in production? Is you still building the platform, or where are you at? We've got about, no, unfortunately, not very much time left.
We went live, as you know, last year in the beta, and then in February we went live in production. We have focused firstly on the consortium members. We have 19 consortium members. About 2/3 of them are already under contract, commercial paying customers, and we're working our way towards the rest of the consortium. And as Christian said, we've just in the last couple of months signed the first non-consortium customers, big law firms, who will be launching in the coming months and quarters. So big pipeline of interested customers, but our goal for 2020 was to get the core group of early adopters up and running out of beta into production, and then operating at some scale and satisfied. So, you know, to come from 0 to 13 or 14 of the largest law firms in the world using your platform to manage security sensitive issues is a lot to take on. We're quite proud to say that's all gone well. Nothing's gone wrong yet, but that's where we are. We're going as fast as we can. Next year we'll, you know, easily double that number, but that's where we are right now. We're you know, very much live and in production, but still at quite limited scale.
I'm going to have to stop, unfortunately, but listen, I miss seeing you both, unfortunately. It's a shame that we can't go and hang out at conferences, but I've really loved chatting to you, and appreciate you answering all my questions, and hopefully that'll be really helpful for anybody who wants to be more familiar or just become familiar with Rain and Core. So thank you so much for making the time to speak to me today.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you both.